Imagine a silent laboratory at midnight. A row of metal cages stretches across a dimly lit room, and inside one of them, a dog lifts its head slowly, sensing something different in the air. Its eyes are confused, frightened, waiting for a routine that suddenly feels broken. What the dog cannot understand is that a single government decision has just erased $28 million in animal testing funds across the United States. Not reduced, not phased out, completely wiped out in a moment. And the shockwaves are still spreading. Scientists pause mid-experiment, staring at frozen computer screens and unfinished studies that once promised new cures for cancer, rare diseases, and life-saving medical breakthroughs. Their hands stop moving, but their minds race with a single question. What happens now? Outside the lab walls, animal rights groups erupt with celebrations. They call it a victory, a turning point in history, a moment when voices that could not speak for themselves were finally being heard. But beneath the noise and the headlines, a darker, more complicated story begins to unfold, one that neither side was fully prepared for. Because when funding disappears overnight, nothing in these research facilities is simple. Inside every cage is a living being whose routine has depended on those research budgets. Feeding schedules, medical care, caretakers, medications, environments, everything. Busy hallways that once buzzed with urgency suddenly fall quiet as staff gather in offices to discuss the fallout. Conversations happen in whispers. Some researchers feel crushed, some feel relieved, others feel betrayed. Decades of work feel as if they are slipping through their fingers, and no one knows how to catch them. Meanwhile, thousands of animals sit in limbo. Dogs that were days away from undergoing tests now wait with no clear plan. Monkeys trained for cognitive research tilt their heads, observing the tension in the humans around them. Rabbits kept for testing medical devices twitch their noses, unaware that the system supporting them has been shaken to its core. The caretakers continue doing what they can, feeding, checking, cleaning, but they sense that the ground beneath their feet is shifting. Across the country, news outlets debate the decision. Some anchor their coverage on the ethical victory, showcasing emotional footage of activists cheering and posters calling for an end to animal cruelty. Other networks raise concerns about scientific progress falling behind, warning that medical research cannot transform overnight. The public watches, divided, unsure of which future is safer, one without animal testing or one without the breakthroughs such testing has historically produced. And then there is Morgan Island, a place known by a second name whispered in documentaries and investigative reports, Monkey Island. Over 4,000 rhesus monkeys live there, isolated from the world except for the researchers who visit. For decades, these monkeys have been part of studies designed to understand diseases that affect humans. They have been tagged, tracked, observed, cared for, and sometimes used in experiments that shaped modern medicine. They do not know politics. They do not know funding. They only know the daily rhythm that has defined their lives. Now, that rhythm is cracking. The people responsible for feeding and caring for them gather in staff rooms, examining emails and official statements that do not explain what the next steps will be. Supplies that were ordered regularly begin to slow. A sense of uncertainty hangs over the island as thick as the humid air that rolls through the trees. The monkeys wait for answers that the humans themselves do not yet have. Back in the labs, researchers try to reorganize what remains of their resources. Some scramble to apply for emergency grants. Some rewrite their projects to fit non-animal methods. Others simply sit at their desks, staring at lab notebooks filled with years of work, knowing that without funding, those pages might never lead to anything meaningful outside the room they sit in. One researcher, who has spent nearly a decade studying a rare genetic disorder, wipes tears from her eyes as she reads the news twice, hoping she misunderstood it. But across the hallway, activists feel hope rising. Technologies like organ-on-a-chip, advanced computer models, and human cell simulations are improving faster than ever. They argue that humanity is finally stepping into a future where animals do not need to suffer for science. Their voices grow louder as they push for an immediate, complete shift. Yet scientists warn that these alternatives are promising but not fully ready to replace everything. The gap between the dream and the reality is still wide. Inside another lab, a group of monkeys sits quietly in a testing room. They have been through routines for years, memory tasks, feeding times, regular health checks. The staff who work with them daily feel the pressure building. Some worry that if funding disappears quickly enough, there may not be enough staff to maintain the quality of care. They fear that animals already in the middle of studies may face abandonment or rushed transitions to sanctuaries that are already full, underfunded, or unprepared. The debate intensifies. Journalists interview doctors who argue that without certain animal models, breakthroughs for cancer treatment, neurological disorders, and vaccine research could be delayed by years. In response, animal rights advocates present case after case of unnecessary suffering, exposing harsh practices that the public rarely sees. Social media becomes a battlefield of outrage, empathy, misinformation, and emotion. Meanwhile, behind closed doors in Washington, officials push forward a new directive: move toward non-animal methods quickly, efficiently, boldly. They argue that America should lead the world in pioneering modern tools that are more accurate, faster, and humane. But critics warn that a rushed transition could create a scientific vacuum, leaving millions of patients without progress while leaving thousands of animals stuck in the aftermath without proper plans. Laboratory corridors grow quieter as weeks pass. Projects that once operated like precision engines now feel like abandoned factories. Machines sit untouched. Papers remain unfinished. Graduate students question whether their research careers are over before they began. Senior scientists stare at shelves of biological samples that may never be analyzed. A feeling of paralysis spreads through places that once thrived on innovation. And far away, on Morgan Island, the monkeys sit in the treetops. Some groom each other, unaware of the human turmoil attached to them. Others explore the shoreline, watching boats drift by. They do not know that their future hangs in the balance. They do not know that decisions made in distant offices may determine whether they remain research subjects, are transferred to overcrowded sanctuaries, or face an uncertain fate. At the same time, in small offices across America, startups and labs working on non-animal technologies celebrate. Their funding is increasing. Their work is being recognized. They see this shift as the dawn of a new scientific era, but they also understand the pressure placed on them. If they fail to deliver fast enough, the country will feel the consequences. Hospitals and patient advocacy groups begin raising alarms. Parents of children with rare diseases ask how research will continue without essential funding. Doctors treating aggressive cancers question whether treatments in development will stall. People who rely on experimental drugs fear they may lose the breakthroughs they were counting on. The human side of this decision reveals itself quietly, painfully. In the labs, animals continue their routines, unaware that the humans around them are fighting battles bigger than they can comprehend. The dogs wag their tails when caretakers enter. The monkeys search the faces of researchers for signs of stress they cannot decode. The rabbits huddle together in corners, reacting only to the tone in the room. Federal agencies release new guidelines encouraging the rapid adoption of non-animal methods, but implementation is messy. Some labs lack the technology, others lack the training. Transition plans are unclear. Grant applications take months. Activists say progress is too slow. Scientists say it is too fast. The animals remain caught in the middle, silent witnesses to a war of ideals. And then, the country begins asking deeper questions. Should animal testing end immediately, even if human patients suffer delays? Should it continue until alternative technologies are perfect? Who gets to decide whose lives matter more, human or animal? And is it possible to build a future where neither side has to lose? The story becomes larger than the funding itself. It becomes a reflection of society's struggle between compassion and innovation, ethics and urgency, emotion and evidence. Every person, every lab, every animal becomes part of a complex, painful debate with no easy answers. The $28 million is gone. The impact remains. And the future of American science stands at a crossroads, waiting for the next decision that will shape generations. The laboratories begin to operate in slow motion, as if time itself has become heavy. Researchers walk through hallways that once echoed with the hum of machines, the chatter of students, and the rush of discovery. Now, every step feels uncertain. Many of them carry thick binders filled with years of data, notes, diagrams, hypotheses, wondering if any of it will ever reach the world outside. Some cannot sleep at night, imagining the patients who were counting on them. Others stare at grant rejection emails, their hands trembling, trying to make sense of the new reality they never saw coming. In conference rooms, heated arguments break out. Senior scientists emphasize that medical progress relies on consistency, not sudden disruption. Younger researchers argue that the system needed to change anyway, that the old methods were too slow and too cruel. Administrators try to calm the tension, but the room always divides into two worlds, those who see the future and those who see the fallout. Meanwhile, animal care technicians continue their daily routines with a weight on their shoulders that grows heavier each day. They walk past cages with clipboards in their hands, pretending that everything is normal. But nothing is normal anymore. Some animals are in the middle of long-term studies, experiments planned months or years in advance. Without funding, those studies cannot continue properly. Supplies run low. Specialized diets become harder to order. Medical treatments are delayed because approval committees are frozen in uncertainty. In one corner of a primate facility, a rhesus monkey sits on a perch, watching a researcher who has been visiting him for years. Their bond is not one the public sees, but it is real. The monkey recognizes the researcher's voice, the sound of footsteps, the calm tone that has always brought comfort. Today, the researcher's voice shakes. For the first time, the monkey senses fear coming from the other side of the bars. Across the country, activists continue to rally. They post videos, organize protests, and flood social media with calls to end animal testing forever. Many of them share footage from hidden investigations, images that shock the public, images that raise questions the scientific community struggles to answer. Some people watch these videos and say the decision to cut funding should have been made years ago. Others say the videos show fragments of a larger, more complicated truth. The public becomes more divided with each passing day. Inside newsrooms, editors debate how to cover the story. Some want to highlight the ethical victory. Others insist on focusing on scientific risks. Interviews with government officials reveal carefully chosen words, phrases like modernization, transition, and technological, few concrete plans. No one seems to fully understand how fast the system is supposed to shift or who is responsible for managing the fallout. At the same time, new technology companies step into the spotlight. They demonstrate devices that simulate human organs on microchips, systems that mimic breathing lungs, beating hearts, functioning kidneys. Investors pour money into these innovations, hoping they will replace animal models entirely. But inside their own labs, the developers of these technologies know the truth. The tools are promising, but they are not yet universal. They can solve some problems incredibly well, but others remain far beyond their reach. A quiet fear grows in research communities. Without a stable bridge between old methods and new ones, the country risks falling into a gap where neither system can fully support scientific progress. Patients begin asking doctors whether treatments they were waiting for will still move forward. Parents of children with genetic disorders worry that clinical trials will slow down. Advocacy groups demand answers, but the answers are always the same. No one knows yet. Back on Morgan Island, the monkeys continue their daily lives, but the air feels different. Caretakers walk the trails with heavy hearts, checking food stations, inspecting shelters, and observing troop behavior. They know the island relies on consistent funding to maintain its ecosystem. They know the monkeys cannot simply be relocated. They are too many, and sanctuaries are already overflowing. Rumors spread among the staff. Some say the island will be converted into a sanctuary. Others say the research program will continue at a smaller scale. Others fear that decisions will be delayed until it's too late. The island becomes a symbol of America's confusion, a place trapped between the past and the future, between compassion and complexity. Journalists request permission to visit, but access is restricted. Satellite images show only treetops and distant shapes moving through the forest. The monkeys remain unseen, silent reminders of a larger conversation unfolding far away. In urban centers, medical researchers gather at conferences to debate the future. Some argue that breakthroughs in AI will soon simulate entire biological systems, eliminating the need for animal models. Others warn that biological unpredictability cannot be fully captured by algorithms. Every statement is met with applause from one side and frustration from the other. Meanwhile, deep inside a neuroscience lab, a scientist sits alone reviewing brain scans from a study that was supposed to continue for another 2 years. The images on the screen represent a potential treatment for a neurological disorder that affects millions. The scientist scrolls through the data slowly, realizing that this may be the farthest the study will ever go. The feeling is not just sadness, it is grief. Grief for the patients, for the work, for the animals involved, and for the countless hours lost to uncertainty. As days turn into weeks, the debate grows louder. Politicians use the decision for their campaigns. Talk show hosts turn it into entertainment. Influencers make reaction videos, but inside the labs, no one is entertained. They are exhausted. They are stuck. They are waiting for answers that are not coming. In smaller facilities, layoffs begin. Some caretakers pack their belongings with tears running down their faces, worried about the animals they leave behind. Others stay, hoping new funding will appear. But hope becomes harder to hold as more programs shut down. The animals react to changes in subtle ways. Dogs bark less frequently, sensing the tension. Monkeys cling to each other more tightly. Rabbits stay alert longer at night. Animals understand far more than humans realize, and uncertainty is something they feel deeply. Over time, the nation starts to see the cracks forming. Medical research slows. Delays begin appearing in development pipelines for new drugs. Pharmaceutical companies raise concerns. Hospitals report shortages in experimental treatments used for compassionate care. The consequences move from distant labs to everyday lives. And yet, alongside all this, something new begins to grow, a willingness to rethink the entire system. Scientists who once resisted non-animal methods begin exploring them more seriously. Activists who once demanded an immediate end begin understanding the challenges of transition. Small, quiet collaborations emerge between groups that never spoke before. Some labs start combining old methods with new technologies, creating hybrid models that reduce animal use while maintaining safety and accuracy. The path forward is still unclear, but for the first time, both sides slowly begin to understand that progress requires balance, not extremes. The future of science cannot be built on suffering, but it also cannot be built on sudden abandonment. The real answer lies somewhere in between, somewhere where compassion and innovation can coexist. The $28 million may be gone forever, but the questions it raised continue to shape the nation. Scientists, activists, caretakers, and animals now stand together at the edge of a new chapter in American research, one filled with uncertainty, challenge, and the possibility of a future where breakthroughs are achieved without leaving suffering in their wake. The uncertainty grows heavier as the weeks stretch into months. Laboratories that once thrived on constant motion now operate like fatting stars, their brightness slowly dimming. Machines sit covered, instruments remain untouched, and experiments that once pushed medical science forward now exist only as frozen snapshots of what could have been. Every researcher knows that time is slipping away, and every passing day feels like a reminder of how quickly progress can be undone. The tension becomes visible in the smallest details. Graduate students whisper about dropping out of their programs. Young scientists question whether they chose the wrong career path. Senior researchers carry exhaustion on their faces, their voices strain from explaining to their teams why projects can't move forward. Funding meetings drag into late evenings, filled with long silences, shaking heads, and the constant fear that more cuts are coming. The animals feel the shift. Monkeys flinch at sudden noises, sensing the stress running through the facility. Dogs cling to caretakers, seeking reassurance they can't receive. The people responsible for their care try to maintain calm expressions, but their eyes tell another story, a story of fear, of responsibility, of knowing that lives depend on decisions far beyond their control. Across the country, policymakers continue celebrating the shift toward non-animal methods. They appear on television, emphasizing the modernization of science, the importance of ethical progress, the promise of new technologies. Their words sound confident, rehearsed, smooth. But inside scientific circles, those same words feel like pressure applied without understanding. Technicians who once worked overtime now find themselves sitting at desks, trying to plan for futures they can't predict. Papers remain unpublished because the data can no longer be completed. Studies stall halfway through their timelines, leaving scientists forced to choose between abandoning years of work or rewriting their research to fit tools that are not fully ready. The human side of the crisis expands. A mother waiting for a new therapy for her child's rare disease speaks in interviews, her voice cracking as she asks whether the progress made so far will be lost. A cancer patient participating in a clinical trial hears that new data won't come in time to advance the treatment. Advocacy groups for autoimmune disorders, neurological conditions, and genetic diseases all begin raising their voices, not in anger, but in desperation. In research centers, the emotional strain becomes overwhelming. One evening, a scientist sits alone at her lab bench, staring at a small vial containing samples she collected over 3 years. The project was supposed to lead to a breakthrough treatment. Now, the vial represents a dead end. Tears fall onto the notebook beside her, smudging the ink of carefully written observations. She knows she cannot continue the study, and she knows the animals involved in it cannot simply be released or discarded. Their lives are interconnected with her work, and she feels responsible for each one. Meanwhile, on Morgan Island, the atmosphere grows even more unstable. Caretakers continue their routines, but conversations behind closed doors become urgent, tense, filled with concern. Supplies arrive late or not at all. Some workers talk about backup plans that don't exist. Others fear the island will slip into neglect if decisions aren't made soon. The monkeys continue living their lives unaware of the storm forming around them, but the humans who care for them cannot ignore the growing weight. As these tensions build, something else begins to happen across the country, quiet, gradual, almost invisible at first. Scientists and activists start communicating directly. Small meetings take place in neutral locations. Ideas are exchanged. Researchers explain the complexities of biomedical work, why certain diseases still require animal models, why sudden elimination creates dangerous gaps. Activists share their concerns, their hopes, their belief in a more humane future. The discussions are difficult, emotional, but they mark the beginning of understanding where before there was only anger and accusation. This fragile cooperation starts to take root. Joint task forces are formed. Pilot projects begin. New protocols are designed to reduce animal use while maintaining scientific reliability. Investment shifts toward technologies that blend biological and computational methods. Slowly, researchers start to see possibilities emerging from the chaos. But none of this progress solves the immediate crisis. Laboratories still struggle to maintain animals already in their care. Funding remains absent. Staff continue to leave. The future remains uncertain. In medical schools and research universities, professors gather their students and explain the situation with painful honesty. They talk about resilience, adaptation, scientific responsibility. They remind them that progress has always faced obstacles and that breakthroughs often emerge from the toughest challenges. But even as they speak, their own doubts linger beneath the surface. Outside, the public's attention begins to fade, moving on to the next big controversy, the next headline, the next political moment. But inside labs, the consequences remain. Animals still wait in their enclosures, relying on caretakers who feel powerless. Scientists still stare at unfinished work, feeling the weight of years slipping away. Morgan Island still sits quietly in the Atlantic, home to thousands of monkeys whose fate is tied to decisions that no one is ready to make. As the tension reaches its peak, the nation faces a truth it can no longer avoid. Ending animal testing is not a switch to flip, and continuing it without change is no longer acceptable. The country stands suspended between two worlds, neither of which can fully support the future alone. The next chapter is coming, but no one knows which direction it will take. And as the uncertainty deepens, every person, every lab, every animal becomes part of a vast story still unfolding. A story shaped by science, ethics, fear, hope, and the difficult choices that will define the future of medicine.